Hello, and welcome to the Common Geeking Program, a book club podcast where each week 3 of us read up on a topic and then discuss it from geeky, nerdy perspectives. This week, I am your host, Laura Kramer, and today we'll be talking about the listener pick. So thank you so much to Rich Baldez, I believe. I'm going to check that before we do anything else. For choosing our topic, which is going to be the now Amazon Prime original, The Expanse. And I figured since the 3 of us didn't have that much experience watching the show, we wanted to have it themed around something that we could relate to. And so we were talking about the power of the people. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. But this week, I'm joined by 2 people, each of whom has selected a domain that they think connects to our topic and theme. And they are...
It's me, Jahnavi, and I am going to be talking about a movie from way back in 1960 called Inherit the Wind, which is a dramatic retelling about the Scopes monkey trial, which was the U.S. Supreme Court trial, or the trial that eventually made it to Supreme Court, about evolution and teaching evolution in schools and whether or not that should be allowed. And I thought that would be a good sort of contrasting topic to bring in while we're talking about the power of the people, because, I mean, sometimes that is used a little questionably.
What do you mean? Well, thank you very much.
And I'm Patrick. I'm going to be talking about Firefly, which is a pretty analogous parallel to the story of The Expanse. So I figured I would just take the easy way out.
Beautiful. Love the easy way out. It's my favorite way. All right. Thanks, guys. I just lost what we're talking about. Here we go. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So we are going to start by summarizing the topic and domains before we openly discuss, and then we'll close with a competitive rating section to determine who best contributed and whether today's topic was or is enjoyable. Let's talk about The Expanse. So if you guys don't mind, I'll kick it off a little bit, and then I'll have you guys talk about some of the specific episodes that we watched. The Expanse is a TV show that was originally aired on the Sci-Fi Channel, and it's about a futuristic world, surprise, surprise, in which humanity has kind of split. There are Earthers, there are Martians, and there are Belters. And Earth and Mars seem to have the more highly
They're
developed,
more educated, more developed areas.
They bougie is what we're saying. They are the bourgeois in this.
The Belters live out in the asteroid belt with low gravity, not a lot of resources. They rely on ice shipments from other places for their water.
They are overworked. They kind of work in the mining situation. So,
the safety is not really regarded as one of their top priorities because the people in charge don't see a reason to protect those who work for them because they don't see them as human.
It's the 1800s, but in space.
And the Belters, because they're in low gravity, they've their limbs have elongated and they can't handle the gravity of the real planets. Their
muscle mass is low and it's just all around not a good place.
Yeah. The Expanse originally aired in December of 2015, and I believe the first 3 seasons aired on Sci-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Before the show was canceled, to the outrage of many, many fans. And the outrage was so great, and there were so many tweets about it, and people were posting on social media and making a whole outroar that Jeff Bezos actually picked it up to continue the series on Amazon. So it is now the 4th season is airing on Amazon as an Amazon original. And that is why we're talking a little bit about the power of the people. This is something that it seems like the show was going to ultimately be canceled, but because it had such a strong following, it was picked up by a huge company such as Amazon to continue on.
Entertain
But it
us!
also, the ratings in terms of just what articles and people were saying about it were very good. But inherently, when you have a show on Sci-Fi that's this big of a scale and this big of an investment, Sci-Fi is not a very popular channel, so it's going to have low numbers watching it. It was doomed to fail on that channel in terms of being able to stay there. I think it needs a place like Amazon or a major network. Maybe not Fox, because Fox hates everything good.
But it's almost like an HBO's type scale in some ways.
I think HBO would be sick, because my one gripe with the show, we can get into it later, is the fact that the special effects are kind of iffy, but that's what comes with being on a low budget channel like Sci-Fi.
Apparently, on the date that it aired, so to back up a little bit, it is based on a series of novels by James S.A. Corey, which I hear that the novels are fantastic. So if you've watched the show and haven't read the books, I hear they're really, really great. It is on my list of things to read. But the Sci-Fi president, Dave Howe, apparently said The Expanse is epic in scale and scope and promises to be Sci-Fi's most ambitious series to date. And it sounds like they just weren't able to get the viewership on that specific channel because of TV reasons. I mean, I think that there's a lot in our current generation where television is maybe not the most, or like standard cable channels are not going to be the way to go to get a series that's that ambitious.
I think that at this point, most people I know my age do not have cable, do not want cable, would like to.
I have it just because it's included in my rent, but
that's pretty nice. Anyway, we'll get more into that in the discussion, but we watched the first, I think we committed to at least the first 3 episodes. I know Pat watched a little bit more. I watched the 4th.
I managed to watch 5.
Season.
I managed to watch 5 episodes. So we can do the first 5 if
I have not seen the 5th one, so let's stick to the first 4.
All right. Oh, okay. For some reason I thought I was behind, but yes.
No, I have been trying to. It's just been, I've been so busy that I got through the first 4 and I watched them again because I'd seen them earlier and I wanted to watch them again.
Yeah, no,
so
that's fair. They are kind of, they are like hefty episodes, so.
Yeah, a lot happens.
You can't be texting during these.
No, nor do you want to be. I think they're really great. So let's just talk a little bit about those first 4 episodes so that we can kind of let the listeners know what our perspective is. It is not series-wide. I don't think any of us has seen past the first 5 or 6 episodes, or Pat's seen the whole first season.
I've seen the whole first season, yeah.
But yeah, so Jahnavi, you want to kick off with kind of the first episode premise?
Yeah, so you open with kind of like the shot of this woman. We don't know her name yet, but yeah, she appears to be trapped on like a room in a spaceship. Weird things seem to be happening ominously on that spaceship. She manages to escape, and then we are cutting to, I guess, the scenario with, I don't remember if they show the intro text before or after that, but
no, it starts out with her escaping, and then
they go into the intro text.
Yeah,
and then she escapes. She goes and finds the core of the ship, and she sees some weird stuff happening in that.
She's screaming.
And then she screams. And then it goes to the intro.
Right. That's where the viewer kind of gets the setup of the whole series of like, hey, the UN runs Earth. The Mars is colonized. You have belters who are mining resources, and air and water is more precious there. So you are sort of I think you are prepared and kind of set up for a something with a large scope. You've already got, 3 main players and what's going to happen.
I think they also might mention the OPA in that too, which is like the rebel group, part of the Outer Planets Alliance, which is the people who don't live on Mars or Earth, who are trying to not necessarily gain independence, even though that's probably one of their goals, but they just want to be treated fairly by both Mars and Earth because they're being taken advantage of.
By both, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was...
And Mars and Earth don't like each other very much at all.
No.
I don't know. I have to go on a small aside here, is that I want to know how the UN gained control of anything. That's not what the UN is, and also what? I don't know. It took me out of it a little bit.
In several sci-fi type things, when we fast forward in time to the point where humanity is now exploring space, the assumption is that we would need some sort of unifying government for the entire planet in order to actually make large-scale progress on space travel, and they just kind of attribute it to the UN, even though we don't necessarily know. But that's just the narrative they choose, is that the UN would be the one thing to bring the world together, and then we would prosper from there on.
I mean,
Yeah.
I understand why it needs to be that way, or there needs to be something, but I don't know. I was
It could have been
my eyebrows were raised because it's
well, we can
But in any case, the the beginning part. The beginning part was the one I watched longest ago.
In the beginning part, we find out that we don't necessarily know this girl's name yet, but in one of the shots, they show her jumpsuit is from the ship called the Scopuli. And then when we get back from the intro thing, we see another ship, which is just roaming out. We find out that's an ice freighter. They're the ones who actually mine the ice and bring it to the belt so that people can have water. They receive a distress call from the Scopuli, and they go through this whole ordeal where the captain says, we don't want to investigate it, scrub the logs, whatever, and then the one dude on
it's a pirate
ship, his name is... Yeah, they think it's a trap, and it's pirates looking for their ice and their cargo. But one of the guys on it who is an acting XO, his name is James Holden, he decides to actually go back and log the distress call, which means that by law, since they received the distress call and logged it, they have to actually go investigate it. So he takes a crew and goes to the Scopuli. They find it's completely empty, and there's a transponder that's distributing the SOS. And in the process, a ship comes out of hyperspace and starts acting aggressive. They activate their weapon system, and they shoot some torpedoes. They think it's at them, so they're trying to burn around this asteroid that they're kind of near to escape it. But those torpedoes end up going back to the base ship, which is called the Canterbury, and now they are stranded in space.
Yeah, it destroys the Canterbury. Yeah.
Yeah, the Canterbury and all their friends. So there are now, I think, 5 people
in a tiny space shuttle, like floating around on their own. And they're in like a short range shuttle, so they don't have the life support they need to survive very long. They're trying to figure out how to find another, like, how to then be rescued themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened in the first episode.
So, pretty dramatic start. I think that you don't usually start a sci-fi with blowing up a bunch of characters you just met, so I think that it really sets a tone for the series.
It's pretty fucked up. And they also had such a big name for the other EXO. They had one EXO go crazy at the beginning of the episode, and he was the actor who played, I think it was Mike in Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
I also sorry.
He killed himself. No, you're good.
Yeah, no, I was just also going to mention that the first episode is called Dulcinea. And that's like, it's pretty literary. Dulcinea is the person who you never get to see when you read Don Quixote. It's the person that Don Quixote fights for. But you never see. And then the word, like, has, like, the first part of it, like, Dulcinea, like, the dulce part means sweetness or, like, something sweet. So I don't know how that directly correlates to the action yet, nor do I have any great ideas on, like, what that means. But I feel like another thing that speaks to, I guess, the breadth of the Expanse, if you will, is like how it endeavors to be literary immediately. I think even the ice freighter ship, wasn't it called the Canterbury?
Yeah, it is the Canterbury.
So yeah, like, which is the Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how relevant, like, particularly these things are, but at least the episode title has to be significant in some way. But
yeah. I think the sweetness might, like, refer to, in the first episode, we see a lot of like, personal relationships develop. We have James Holden and the woman on the Canterbury. I can't remember her name, but they were in a relationship. You get the little bit of what the fuck are their names? The Amos and
Naomi,
yeah. So Naomi and Amos have, like, a little thing. We also skipped over the part where Miller, the detective on the belt, is tasked with investigating the missing millionaire heiress Julie Mao.
Who we see, and that she's the one that was on the ship at the very, very beginning.
So I think the Canterbury itself is almost the person that they're fighting for revenge, for justice, and then you also have Miller, whose Dulcinea is Julie in a way. So I think maybe that's where the name comes in.
Mm.
And
it actually turns into like a very kind of literal Dulcinea for Miller. I don't know when that actually becomes, but he almost becomes obsessed with his quest to find Julie, to the point where he stops doing his actual job.
So the implication
that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, so that the implication that Miller is a Don Quixote is a little bit ominous in this setting of just like just running after things and like, you know.
Yeah, he's very brash. He's kind of a drunk. His own partner doesn't really trust him. Everybody in the police department thinks he's just some nut job. So, like, Don Quixote is a character who's just too foolish and, like, not really very smart. Mm-hmm. And that's what, like, gets him into some weird antics, whereas Miller is just not really taking care of himself and he's, like, acting like a loose cannon.
We just spent way too much time on that, so we're going to kind of blow through the next couple of episodes and maybe just, like, forward that conversation into the discussion. It'll be great. The second episode is called The Big Empty. So we see Miller is on Ceres, which is kind of the main belt that we see, the main, I guess, asteroid that they're living on.
That's a moon of Mars, isn't it?
Oh, maybe.
I think.
Yeah, I should know that, but I don't. So he's investigating...
oh, no, it's an asteroid, yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's just slightly closer to Mars's orbit.
I see. So either way, it is not on Earth or Mars. It is for sure the belt. He's investigating a theft of water, which is severely rationed, especially because the Canterbury was going to be bringing a ton of water supply to this area, so they were really dependent on it. Now that the Canterbury has been exploded, the water rationing is even stricter because there may not be many other ships out there getting water for this whole entire area. So the theft of water is much more important than anything else and a much more severe crime.
Resource wars. Everybody have resource wars.
So he's also looking at more information to figure out what happened to Julie Mao. He finds out information that she was on the Scopuli. And as that's happening, we meet one of the, I don't know if she's like one of the main leaders of the UN, but
oh, yeah, the woman?
Yeah.
What's her name?
It's
Christian, I think.
Avasarala, yeah.
Avasarala.
So she definitely comes off as being someone in power on Earth, with definitely sway over the happenings. And she is essentially torturing an OPA captive. She hangs him up on hooks so that...
with gravity.
Yeah, and he's a belter, so he can't handle the gravity, and so he is literally just like...
helpless,
being sucked down into the earth on these hooks. And she's just trying to figure out like why, I guess, Mars would...
He had stolen stealth technology on him at the time of his capture. And they thought he was an OPA terrorist, and he was stealing the stealth technology for the OPA so that they could build ships to then like kind of compete against Earth and Mars.
Yeah, and it was a stealth ship that destroyed the Canterbury, so that ends up definitely coming into play.
Avasarala also, like, was shown having, I guess, like a normal-looking home life and then hanging out to go do a bunch of torture, so that seems significant also.
Yeah.
But they also, when they show her house, you see that she has a bunch of pictures of what you presume to be her son in a UN Marine uniform. And it's implied that he died in battle, and she's kind of taking on a role to not necessarily avenge him, but do what she can to protect Earth.
Yeah, and she's also raising or helping to raise her grandson, who's there. So that was she's definitely a complex character that we're probably going to learn more about.
But while she's torturing this terrorist and trying to find out what he knows, Holden and his crew of people are still trapped in space on their shuttle, running out of oxygen, and they end up getting picked up by a Martian Navy ship.
Yes.
But in the process, he kind of broadcasts this message saying Mars killed the Canterbury. It gets out to everybody, and it kind of becomes a battle cry for the Belters. to remember the Canterbury. Like, they want to revolt against Mars and Earth and kind of just, like, take back their own destiny.
Yep, which is the name of episode 3, Remember the Can't. So Holden's broadcast gets out, which says that Mars has destroyed the Canterbury. And so there are tons of protests. The OPA is starting to be more active. They're blaming Mars. There are riots on Ceres, and it becomes very violent very quickly. Miller's partner, who we've only known for a couple of episodes, is stabbed through the chest with like some
it's a
sort
piece
of
rebar.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. And I'm getting a phone call. It might be my groceries. Hang on.
Sure.
One moment, please.
Of course. I will.
Oh, yeah, you know what? This is not a good time. I'm sorry. I really have to go, but thank you for calling. Bye.
Political stuff?
Bridal stuff. It's way worse.
Before we move on from Remember the Can't, also worth bringing up that can't is a word that means hypocritical and sanctimonious talk.
True.
Typically of like either, I'm reading straight off the dictionary definition right now. It says typically of a moral, religious, or political nature, which again relates to the other parts of the episodes and the general thing of what's going on.
Huh.
I kind of took it to be a different way. Like, I took it as can't as in cannot.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, remember those who, like, have no chance that are counted out. And, like, that's the story of Holden. That's the story of the Belters. They have no possible way of, like, rising up and surviving. So I thought it was more like that, but that's interesting. I mean, it could just be both. Like, maybe they're trying to do...
But that helplessness is frequently exploited, right? Like, that's why you get such long, vast, like, things of stuff going on.
Yeah, like, we find out that Miller is taking bribes from the man who runs the subway system on Ceres, and he's, like, not keeping up to code with his air filters, and it's causing people to have really bad sicknesses when they're taking this public transport. But while Holden and his crew are being captured by the Martian Navy, there's this one dude who's, like, interrogating them, and he's trying to figure out what actually happened with the Scopuli, with the Canterbury, and he tries to play them against each other. We find out that the pilot from their ship is actually ex-Martian Navy. Mm-hmm. They try to play it so that Naomi is an OPA operative, and it's really just like testing their trust of each other because they really don't know each other. They were on the Canterbury, which is a large vessel, and they had only really worked together for this one trip, I think. So they didn't know anything about each other. They're trying to like figure out who to trust.
Yeah, they're not a close team.
Yeah. After that, we find out that they're getting attacked by the same ship or a similar ship that had destroyed the Scopuli and destroyed the Cant. And that's in the next episode called CQB.
Yes, which is the last one that I've seen.
Yes. So the mysterious warship, which is like stealth technology and everything, starts attacking. Mm-hmm. At the same time, Mars is trying to get Holden to recant his...
recant.
Yeah, recant. They're trying to get him to recant his accusation of the Mars Navy. And since he's the only person who can possibly dispute what he had already said, while they're getting attacked, they try to get Holden off the ship, and they also like put all of the information from the ship that's attacking them and the battle in itself on this chip, and they bring it with Holden to see if that can help. Mm-hmm. What else?
Yeah. They're taking...
So he gets off with his crew.
Yeah, they're taking heavy damage, and he's able to escape with his crew, and I think only the one guy that was interrogating them, and then the ship that saved them, or that picked them up, was the flagship of the Martian army, and so the general was like Donager. Not worried at all, and she was like, oh, we're going to destroy this, no problem, and then that ship ends up getting destroyed. So it is... Oh, they self-destruct. Yeah, so they're losing, and they self-destruct in order to make sure that they get away safely. And it is definitely like a dark moment when you see that this huge flagship of a military society is unable to combat this one ship, and you don't really ever see who they're fighting. Like, you don't know what kind of...
Well, you kind of do. I think on this one is where they get boarded, and it's just these dudes wearing... super high-tech armor. Their face is blue. It's just like a blue visor. And they end up like getting one to be subdued, and they try to ask him questions, but all he says is, we're all going to be dead soon anyways, and doesn't say anything. But what happens is when they end up getting off the ship and the other ship gets scuttled, the weird stealth ship goes away. We don't know what happens to that yet, but while they're on this new ship, which is actually a Mars ship, the one guy on there who could possibly vouch for them as a Martian ends up dying because he's got all these bullets just shoved up in him, and they hit a hyperspeed like boost, and that causes all the bullets to shift and just rip through his insides and kill him.
Ugh.
So now it's just all these survivors from the Canterbury and the Donager. It looks really bad. It looks like they're the ones destroying all these ships, and they're in a stolen Martian vessel.
Yeah.
And that's where they leave it.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. And then there's a couple of other side stories or side strands. Stories is definitely better than that. That start happening in this episode. But since we're not going to go further into the episode descriptions from here, I think we can probably leave that. But there are definitely more mysteries and other bits of interest that are occurring during this episode. So a lot going on. I was definitely intrigued by the show, so I started watching it like a couple weeks before we got that this was going to be the listener episode at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I had already started it and was definitely interested, and I'm really glad that we got a chance to listen to it for the podcast, because it is, it's intense. It's an intense show.
It's very intense, and it really doesn't give you any clue as to where the series is going until the very last episode.
And I haven't seen that, so
yeah.
No spoilers yet.
But I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just saying I'm really excited to see the next 3 seasons.
Yeah, I'm excited for sure. Okay, so that was kind of a long summary, but
just a little bit.
We'll figure out how to cut that down. Oh goodness, I can't stop burping. Okay, so that's the very beginning of the Expanse, which again has a lot of information to draw from because the novel series is very long. So, and they're heavy books, like they're big books each one.
And these episodes are all like pretty much an hour long. So, like, it's no wonder we have a bit difficulty summarizing all of it.
That's true. Yeah. I've also heard that they really like go word for word, or at least get most of the gist of the books in each episode. So
that is what I've heard. So a lot of source material, a lot of interesting plot development. So definitely can see why there was such a draw for it to continue. Anyway, if you guys would like to talk about your domains, let's do that, shall we?
So when it was brought up that the topic was going to be Power to the People, I decided to be contrarian and do when the people are, maybe not doing so great. With the whole decision-making thing and the mob mentality thing. So I'm going to be talking about a film called Inherit the Wind. It was released in 1960, and it's a dramatic retelling of sort of the development of the Scopes monkey trial, which is how somebody or a teacher was teaching evolution in schools. I believe it was in I want to say Tennessee. I should know this, but I don't. Anyway, so teacher was teaching that in Tennessee. It was state law at the time that introducing students to like the concept of evolution, it's like contrary to what's in the Bible. It's not against, it's against state law. And therefore, he gets sued. And then it has these, 2 lawyers come and very dramatically debate, the importance of, biblical scholarship versus, the scientific teaching. And it's worth noting that the movie is not very accurate historically in a number of key ways, particularly in the way that the townspeople are portrayed, as, like protesting in this guy's jail cell as he awaits trial. Just being, they're portrayed as, being not so great, but it is relevant in that sometimes when you have people are like, hey, we're fighting for, our equality, we're interested in having, enough power to make sure that, we're okay, we don't want to be taken advantage of. And then you have people protesting because we don't want stuff to change, because we are protecting our culture and our like ideas, and we don't want something compromising that. So reasons why you are fighting in, a big group and rallying your public and your people with you are kind of things why I thought this would be interesting to talk about The Expanse, because at this point it's difficult to know. Well, because I've only seen the first 5 episodes. Which civilizations or like which group side I should be on. Because you don't know. You don't quite know, and you don't know which leaders necessarily are going to be the most moral. You don't know like who's taking care of who. Right. You don't know who's looking out for everybody versus who's actually like talking a good game but looking out for themselves. So it's intriguing.
Nice. Yeah, and I think when I probably could have been more clear on this. When I chose the topic of Power of the People, I was choosing it from a place of not having watched essentially any of the show for any of us. And so I really wanted to talk about the influence of our culture in making sure that this TV show continued. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, the whole show is about Power of the People. I mean, there are riots going on, there are clashes of civilizations. So I think that there are definitely many levels to the theme that we've chosen today. So
how you use your collective voice.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything more that you want to say about Inherit the Wind before we move on?
Nothing except that I think it's a pretty good movie. I know that a lot of people are not fond of watching older movies, but I thought this one was pretty good. It was pretty well acted, and it was received pretty well then. I think it would be, also relevant now with a lot of, things happening politically and in the public sphere as to what group of people you are going to evaluate and how you're going to evaluate them.
Nice. Well, thanks, Jahnavi.
No problem.
Pat, tell us about
What's up?
Firefly.
All right, Firefly is almost, in my opinion, the precursor to what The Expanse is. This is a show from the early 2000s. It was like 2002. The premise of the show is that it takes place 500 years into the future, so like 2502. There's a crew aboard a ship which is called a Firefly class, but that's where it looks like a Firefly because the engine on the back glows and blinks and it looks like kind of bug-like. But we follow this group of people led by Nathan Fillion, who plays Captain Malcolm Reynolds. He's got his whole crew with him. He's got like a mechanic with him. He has a shepherd. He ends up picking up a bunch of people at this one port just to get a little bit of money by offering these people passage to wherever they're going. So he picks up a shepherd, which is like a priest almost, a brother, or he doesn't even know that the sister's with him, but he picks up this man who's like a doctor who has this gigantic box with him. He's got like an enforcer type, he's got his second in command, he's got his pilot, and then he also has this woman who is like an escort, but there's kind of this weird past with them where they almost have a thing. But in the process of the show, we learn more about each character. They all have their own pasts. We find out that in this world, it's the Alliance, which is kind of like the UN, where it's a group of planets who are all aligned with each other. They are very clearly in control. They have the most incredible like navy and all these technologies. And they have the best healthcare and all these resources. We find out that Malcolm Reynolds was a member of the Browncoats, which was a resistance to the Alliance in this war that happened in the past. And his second in command, Zoe, was a member of the Browncoats as well. And they definitely do some questionable things, like they steal and hide things in their Firefly because the way it's built has a bunch of different like nooks and crannies to work with, but they try to...
They're kind of smugglers. I mean, they are smugglers.
Yeah, they're smugglers, but they try not to like get involved with the Alliance because they know there's no way to do it. But we find out later on that the doctor, whose name is Simon, is transporting in that big box his little sister named River. Mm. They are fugitives from the Alliance, so now Malcolm Reynolds has a big-ass target on his ship because he's transporting fugitives. The reason why they're fugitives is because River has this special ability where she's like telepathic and she's also super smart. She's like a child prodigy. And the Alliance was running tests on her brain to see if they could figure out how to like harness that ability and use it as a weapon. Mm. So she also is a master of martial arts. She has the telepathic ability and she can like sense when danger is coming.
She's the Swiss Army knife of humanity.
Yeah, she's real, sick. Though. Like, she ends up doing some pretty hardcore shit later on in the Serenity movie.
True.
So this show really just follows them on all these different adventures, trying to escape the Alliance, but also along the way, we learn different things about the world and how the outer planets are almost like the belt in the Expanse. They don't have a lot of technology. Water's very
scarce.
Like scarce and valuable.
Definitely Wild like, West.
Almost, yeah. It's a Wild West type space show. Like they use a lot of cowboy imagery.
That final frontier.
The one other thing that stuck out to me was in the Expanse, the Belters all speak something called Belter Creole, which is supposed to be like a little bit less of a developed language. It's more slang. It's more uneducated. But in Firefly, we have a lot of people just casually speaking Mandarin, but it's not really seen as a status thing. It's just
the lingua franca.
Yeah, like at the time, the lingua francas are both English and Mandarin, so everybody knows both of them. But then there are also some weird slangs like goram instead of goddamn and things like that. Shiny means like it's really cool, it's good, like so the main reason why I chose Firefly, obviously, is because it was also prematurely canceled. And even though there's still a pretty strong
bastion of fan
effort to get it back on the air, they kind of wrapped things nicely with the Serenity movie. And there's also a bunch of comic books that fill the gaps a little bit. My main gripe, though, is the reason why The Expanse was canceled was just because like it wasn't economically feasible to keep that show on the air. The reason why Firefly was canceled is Fox aired the episodes out of order, so like right there is already a recipe for failure. They canceled it before the whole season had even aired. Like they just didn't even give it a fair shot. And then when Serenity came out, it was a very big deal for the fans and they liked it a lot. We find out a lot about these things called the Reavers, which we only slightly see in the show. They're these people who were exploring out in the depths of the space system, I guess, and they end up going crazy and they start raiding random vessels that are out near them.
Casually eating each other.
Yeah, they rage a lot.
Rape you. They will skin your flesh off your body and kill you. They'll kill you, tear the skin off your flesh, and rape your bodies. And if you're lucky, they'll do it in that order, is what Zoe says in the very first episode. So it's not a great place to live by any means. Like the Alliance are kind of a totalitarian government, and just in order to survive in the outer reaches, you kind of have to be a smuggler, which is what Malcolm Reynolds and his crew does. But Malcolm will frequently stick his neck out to protect the little guy as if he were like a cowboy or a sheriff or something in the Wild Wild West. It's a great show. It's only one season long, and then there's the movie, so I highly recommend everybody watch it. It doesn't take a lot of time.
A lot of people, I believe, at this point, I think, have watched it because
there are still some people, though.
That, like... Well, no, just speaking to how strong the contingent of fans has become. Of, like, people seem to feel pretty strongly about Firefly. They want to tell their friends about it. They want to talk about it. You feel?
Yeah. I want to talk about it. It's so good.
Yeah, I'm a taco about it, hard shell. Let's go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Maybe another episode.
Okay.
But this one too.
That's all I got, really, though.
No, but yeah, Firefly is great. I don't know. It is called Inherit the Wind, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Inherit the Wind.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds very interesting. And The Expanse started out real good. So with all of those summarized, we are going to move on to our discussion, which we have kind of started this whole episode, but we're going to get into it for real coming up. Now that we have summarized our topic and domains, we're going to move on to the discussion. So, I think that we all have some pretty strong feelings about the type of, the theme of this show and some of the happenings and the types of plots that are going on. So, I kind of want to start it off with Jahnavi, if that is okay. I would love to go into a little bit more of the detail about, when Power of the People goes wrong. So, I think in reference to this specific TV show and culture, I think that maybe the Power of the People is a good thing because it seems like this is a really well thought out TV show with a lot of really great plot points and many storylines to delve into with a lot of source material. And so having the fans have a strong enough voice to bring it back seems like a really positive thing. And if we're watching the TV show, unrest is obviously a huge political motivation, and I think it's incredibly important, but it can cause a lot of violence, and that may not be the best route through a political problem. So I would love to talk about Inherit the Wind and how you took that as the Power of the People maybe not going so well. I would love to delve into that a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind.
For The Expanse, the motivation behind people like the Belters specifically feeling, they're discontent, they need more power, they need more visibility, they feel exploited. Those are all things that resonate a lot with various political movements in real life and various movements that we know about. It's the underdog story, right? These people are downtrodden, they're being taken advantage of, they want to rise up and, have something for themselves. So that's a storyline that I think is it's a motive and it's a setup that is well understood, and that is that is well received. For the most part, I think that resonates very well with a lot of people. But when you have a movement or a bunch of people protesting or, making their voices heard for a purpose that is less about fundamental rights and being able to exist, and is more about we want things to stay the way they are, or we don't want to be challenged.
We don't want to change the status quo.
Or not even the status quo, because what if you had something happening where you're protecting the status quo from, we're going to make this really, a bad deal. We're going to let these corporations or whatever come in and use up all our resources at a cheap cost.
Right.
Or something. And people would protest that for sure because they're we're protecting our own. You didn't have the right to do that. So that's a status quo thing also. But I would say more as far as the status quo alone is not necessarily an indicator as to whether or not the mob, quote unquote, is right or wrong. I think that it more has to do with, okay, what is the real reason that all of these people are upset?
Right.
What is this something that is needed for survival, for livelihood? Is this something that this is where our headspace is? This is where our minds are mentally, and that's what we want. I also think it plays into the whole politics part that seems to be coming out in The Expanse. People are going to manage these conflicts face to face, but then also what are they telling the people that they're representing? How is this being presented to everybody else other than the main players?
Because you talked a little bit about some of the plot and a little bit about what the story is about, but not necessarily kind of the outcome. So for Inherit the Wind, with the Monkey Snopes trial, like what was the resolution? What were the two sides of the argument and who ended up ultimately winning?
Yeah, the two sides of the argument were like, okay, you have your biblical scholar who's like defending the state law of not teaching evolution or teaching not going against what's in the Bible. And then you have another lawyer who is backing the teacher who's decided to teach evolution. And what you have in the end is, in a very dramatic way, the lawyer that's, on the state's side ends up getting so like angry and enraged he has like an aneurysm kind of like in the courtroom. Spoilers, sorry. And then he like kind of just...
That's pretty fucked up. Damn, yeah.
Okay.
So it's very dramatic and extra.
Sure.
Yeah, so he dies in the courtroom because he becomes like more and more hysterical almost.
Wow.
And then, the crowd who was like watching this year, like I'm sorry, I can't talk today. But
that's okay.
Yeah, they leave the courtroom and the person, the school teacher has like won the trial, but it like the movie ends with like the lawyer who is defending him like picking up the Bible and like Darwin's Origin of the Species and like balancing them in his hands and then walking out.
Of course.
It seems to be like there still needs to be a balance between like what is established and like what people are comfortable with, or like these issues about, morality and being, because for a long time in America, at least, like being super into the Bible and knowing the Bible really well in particular areas there's a correlation with morality, like, because that's where people are getting their, common moral ground from stuff that's in the Bible. So like, I think that was more the direction the movie was trying to take. It was more like anti-creationism. Maybe you can have both. You don't have to blindly accept something or you blindly follow something. You can also have your questioning about what's going on. And at this point, as far as the Expanse goes, like, it's a little bit less about that because we seem to be following more precise individual storylines of like, at least so far as for what we're discussing, as like, oh, okay, these specific people are trapped on this ship and they happen to like correlate and correspond to the different major players like the Mars and the Belters and Earth, but they're not like, I don't know, we haven't seen a screaming angry mob quite yet.
Well, I think the most screaming angry mob that we saw were the Belters trying to rally against really just their condition, which is not necessarily any one particular person's fault, but just the deteriorating situation on their particular inhabited area. One side isn't necessarily right, it's just what works for everybody, and nothing works for everybody, so how do you kind of find a middle ground? I think that's really complicated.
And a lot of the time, in movies and stories, like, it's kind of set up to be somebody's fault so that you can have, like, a just ending or a satisfying ending.
Right.
But in a lot of cases, there's, like, not going to be a satisfying ending for everybody. And then you get into questions like, okay, maybe this doesn't seem like great justice, but is it, like, the least bloody outcome, say? Or is it the least harmful outcome as far as people's upheaval? Like, those just don't make for as exciting of stories as ones in which you have a very clear, like, person that you're rooting against or rooting for, or like, you want to see these very nice, neat arcs.
Right.
And the fact that, when you get, stories that draw off of real life, like Inherit the Wind, or really like a lot of sci-fi that deals with this underdog story. Because it's compelling. It's compelling because it's still drawing on those human experiences on the large scale of like, hey, you know what? I believe it. I believe that like 1,000 years from now, there will still be resources to fight about.
Right.
And that if we make it, we're still going to be probably fighting about resources.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Pretty fucking sad.
The Expanse contrasts with, I don't know, something like Star Trek, where into the far future where we have all these resources, people don't fight anymore about the same things.
Right.
But this is more like, we're still probably going to be fighting about the same things.
Yeah. And actually, I'm glad that you brought that up because my next question was kind of related to that, which is I think that early sci-fi was, what is the future going to be like? And look at all these cool technologies that we've created to solve all of our problems. And so there are no more problems. Our problems are either going to be external from aliens or whatever, or like we're just going to be exploring this awesome new stuff that we have. Mm-hmm. And I think that The Expanse does a really great job in an area that I think still has a lot of exploring to do, which is this kind of like futuristic, we have these cool technologies that allow us to do a lot, but like humans are still humans and we're still conflicting about a lot of opinions and ways of life. And so I think, Pat, if you want to talk a little bit about how that relates to Firefly, I think that they're very similar in that way.
I think Firefly is an interesting case because it's kind of shows both sides of that. It's just when you don't have the materials and the resources and everything, and you're on the outer rim, you're fighting to survive. You're fighting for your just to live each day to keep being alive. But when you have the Alliance, they have all of the resources, they have all the education, they have all of the food, the water, the technology to make everything good. They're actually being super oppressive and kind of making it harder for the people who don't have. So it's like it's the haves and the have-nots, and then you have like Malcolm kind of stuck in the middle there, trying to not necessarily like dismantle the Alliance, but also trying to just like steal from them because he knows that they have the things that they need. Like there's one episode where he steals medicine from the Alliance to give to this town that's just super struggling. Like almost everybody in that place needs this medicine, but the Alliance is taking it and not giving it to them because they can't pay for it.
That doesn't sound familiar at all.
Yeah, definitely not. To me, like a reason why an older show like Star Trek or like maybe even Doctor Who would be more optimistic is because back then we didn't really know a lot about what the human footprint was going to do to the Earth and how resources were going to become a little bit more scarce with this booming population that we now have. I'm not entirely sure how much it's grown since like a show like Star Trek has been around, but it's definitely more than they thought it would grow. So I think it's just indicative of what the public perception was at the time, whereas now we're pretty worried about the Earth just becoming a big molten pile of garbage, and similar to like WALL-E, where we had to leave the Earth because there just wasn't anything for us anymore.
But a lot of the way that I think that sci-fi has changed throughout the decades has been very much a reflection on the way that people have been feeling.
People feel helpless, people feel like, and that's just indicative of current living conditions. Like people are living paycheck to paycheck, they don't have a lot of security on their jobs, they very frequently have to work themselves more than they should, don't have any time to like enjoy themselves. So it's really like, it's almost, I think it's masochistic is where like you kind of like to torture yourself a little bit. It's weird that they want to keep watching these shows that are pessimistic about the future because maybe it brings them a little bit of comfort that like it's not just them in this situation, it's just how the world is. But
or being able to, if you can't envision a future in which the way that mankind behaves is fundamentally different from the way it behaves right now, then you can still see that like, oh, even in these dystopian environments, you still see characters that you relate to and empathize with. You still see characters that you feel like, according to your moral leanings, are doing the correct thing. Or maybe you're interested in the general vibe of the thing and you just want to watch a well-constructed drama, because that's mostly what I've been getting from it so far. I don't think that I've seen anything particularly unique, I guess, about this setup, but it is very well done and very well constructed, which does go a long way as far as people wanting to watch it.
And that's like, I think the resources is a much bigger part of The Expanse than it is of Firefly. Firefly ends up like the big sell of Firefly was probably going to start happening in season 2, but it got canceled and they kind of rolled it up into that movie Serenity, in that we find out that the Alliance isn't just doing tests on like River and these child prodigies. They did an entire test on a community where they ended up like just completely sedating a population to the point that they were so content with their lives that they didn't even want to get up in the morning. They didn't want to eat. They didn't want to drink. They didn't want to take care of each other. They didn't want to take care of themselves just because they had no emotions.
Yeah.
And they had no feelings whatsoever. And then they ended up like kind of mutating and turning into the Reavers. We find out that the Alliance is actually the reason why the Reavers exist. And Malcolm like almost dies in the process of trying to get this information out to the public and kind of just prove that the Alliance is actually evil. And kind of just continue the revolution that started it all with the Browncoats.
Mm-hmm.
It ties more back into the power of the people, because it starts out the show by showing that the people did not have any power. They lost the rebellion, and now they're living in the footprint of the Alliance. And then it ends the show showing that, like, no matter what, good can overcome evil if you just have, like, the right attitude and you just put in as much effort as you can.
Yeah, it feels very much like a Robin Hood story, too, where he is doing all the smuggling, but it's always for the benefit of the little people. And I think what's so nice about Firefly is that it's set in a kind of a dystopian future, and there's lots of violence and...
Yeah, so he does very frequently try to, like, steal from the rich and give to the needy. In the medicine, in, like... He does do pretty rebellious things by even agreeing to protect Simon and
River. And I wish I knew a little bit more about Inherit the Wind, just as kind of a concept to bring that in here. But I also think that it is really important to see stories that are related to our current political structure and how to make change in the way that we have decided as a country to make change. So I think that being able to see that is also very powerful. Like, being able to make changes through our political system and through the courts is sometimes slow and doesn't always go the way we want it to, but is super important.
Pretty sure Inherent the Wind was made as kind of like also a response to the McCarthyism thing that was going on, of just like, oh man, we have to try and culturally or intellectually eradicate a particular influence that we don't think is good, but, you know, applied to a different situation and different story.
So we don't actually have any listener questions today, so we are able to use our full discussion time. I don't know if that's because it is a listener-picked episode, or if it's just because nobody had any questions.
Because Colin forgot to do it.
Or maybe that. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't know either.
We can ask each other questions.
Yeah. I think one of my questions is, you know, we touched on it a little bit at the beginning. This show came out in 2015, whereas Firefly was out in the early 2000s. And obviously the airing of them was a little bit different. But do you think that if Firefly was a 2015 show, we could have had like a huge Twitter outrage and they would have brought it back on another platform?
I think there's a chance. I think that's a big thing, is there was no real platform for the fans until social media started to really take off. But at the same time, if you air a show out of order, in any context,
setting yourself up for failure.
You're setting yourself up for failure, and Fox might not have seen that as a reason, but another network might have picked them up for sure.
I think Firefly would have done P grade on Netflix.
I think so too, but I also think Joss Whedon has too many things on his plate that I'm not even sure if he wanted to make it come back.
That's fair. True. And I mean, I think that like you already said, Serenity was a pretty good bookend. I don't think that there's too much of a reason for them to go digging that back up when there are so many projects going on.
But if they wanted to use the comics as source material for more things, the Shepherd's Tale book was insane. You find out, we knew that Shepherd in Serenity was an ex-Alliance military dude, and then he found Jesus, and that all changed. But it goes through his entire backstory. It's so cool. We find out again, I don't know if you've seen this, but Wash ends up dying in Serenity, and I
started with Serenity and then watched Firefly.
What the fuck?
I know. My friends did not do that right for me.
They pulled a fox on you.
They did.
So we find out that actually Zoe is pregnant before he dies, so she has a Wash to live on.
I am a leaf on the wind.
Sad. Watch me soar. But yeah, so
that show made me cry.
I think Firefly had everything to succeed besides a network that believed in it. But if you look at Brooklyn Nine-Nine got canceled, I think that was also by Fox.
Yep. And it was picked up by NBC.
They love everything that's
really
pure.
Funny though, because in one of the episodes they actually talk about Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the precinct was going to be absorbed by another precinct, and then it gets saved by some Twitter outrage. So they kind of like predicted their own fate. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was so good.
That's amazing.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love that show.
I love that show. I was so relieved when it got picked back up.
I didn't even start watching it until after that happened, but then I just binged the rest of it, and it was fantastic.
It's so good.
Well, yeah, and that's another reason why I think Firefly would have been better off released today, because
you can binge it?
Well, yeah, because you can binge it. Bingeability seems to be pretty key for a lot of people. And then also because, like, news will spread a lot faster.
Yeah, that's true.
Definitely a lot of, like, memes and whatnot would have been spawned, and people would be like, well, we can't get rid of it now. It has too much of a presence. So.
Yeah, that's true.
This is a very good show, though.
Yeah, it is a good show. I wish that I had, like, just right out of my back pocket an example of Twitter saving a terrible show, but I can't actually think of anything.
Power of the people.
Yeah, usually there's
Twitter.
Not really a fan.
Self-selecting the best media.
But we'll see. I mean, I know we touched on it a little bit in the fandom episode, too, where there are times when the fandom will push a media to change and have an influence over the way the stories go. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best thing. But in this case, I am super grateful that The Expanse was picked up, because I think it's a fantastic show and I really look forward to watching more of it. It reminds me a little bit of the first couple seasons of the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, which is one of my favorite shows.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just really pumped to keep watching, and I'm glad that I know that it's not immediately over. But yeah, does anybody have any final thoughts on The Expanse or their domains that they want to bring up at this particular moment in time?
Not that I want to say, because you haven't seen it yet.
Okay, so I'll get back to you as soon as I'm done with the season.
Yes.
I just wanted to also, this is a thought I just had, is that Inherit the Wind, and like comparing Inherit the Wind to Expanse as far as like, power of the people, is that like, as far as just the presentation of drama goes, just the aesthetics of that have changed a lot also. As far as camera shots and the way that things are acted and the way that people enunciate and say things and the way that drama itself is set up and constructed is very interesting to me. But there is definitely like nods to literariness still, as how we kind of talked about when we were summarizing the episodes. And I think a lot of that comes out in Inherit the Wind also, because of quoting various Bible verses and stuff. So that's cool. We are still very literary, or at least like we still draw on largely the same sorts of bodies of work in, I guess, like English language media, which is interesting to me. And I have to wonder, like, if thousands of years and now we make it to space and are still fighting over resources, whether that'll still be a thing.
Yeah, we'll still be quoting books and...
Yeah, maybe Harry Potter would be the new, like, Don Quixote. People would be like, oh my gosh, this thing.
Man, that is a thought experiment that I might take myself down later.
Go for it. I'd be interested to hear your conclusions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. We do... No matter what, I think that our perspective, like, we are a storytelling type of, I don't know, people, I guess.
I don't know. The English language speaking population definitely has like a canon. And that canon is like a little bit self-perpetuating, never seems to quite peter out all the way.
Yeah. Now, as I said before, we didn't have any listener questions today, but if you are interested in asking about something, we try to make weekly posts on the Monday before the episode is going to record. That gives us time to, we know what our topic and domains are, and you'll be able to ask your questions about that specific episode if you have any. So feel free to comment on those posts. I believe they're on Facebook and Twitter, so you can comment or reply, and we'll talk about it on the episode. All right. Well, thank you guys for that discussion. I just read the word for a blank adjective discussion, and I panicked in my head, so I just said discussion. But I think it was really interesting. I think that we got a little bit more political than we sometimes do on this podcast, because we were watching a lot of things that were pretty specifically about political competition and struggles. So
everybody vote. Is this going to be airing?
This is going to come out after.
Oh my god, y'all motherfuckers better have voted, my friends.
But we are going to move on to the ratings. So we are going to have you guys each rate the topic on a scale from 1 to 5 pieces of ice. So, in the Expanse, the series and belter populations need ice to survive, and so it is a very important resource. And so, Jahnavi, if you want to kick us off with the Expanse, how'd you like it on a scale of 1 to 5?
I'm gonna give the Expanse 3 pieces of ice. I thought it was...
Thrice, as it were.
Yes. I thought it was well executed. I thought that it is constructed to be compelling, but I feel as though, for me, I felt like it was leaning very much into the drama, and I found it a little bit exhausting to get through like a whole hour of very much the same tone throughout.
Yeah.
So
that's how I felt about Breaking Bad, actually.
Yeah, so that kind of affected my interpretation, or like my enjoyment and my rating of The Expanse. And I also feel as though The Expanse is not so far, for me, saying or presenting any new ideas about civilization or cultures or the way people are or could be. And that's something that I want my sci-fi to do. I want it to explore that, and I don't feel like The Expanse is doing that so far, and I'm a little miffed. But it is very good.
Interesting.
Like, I still have liked seeing what has been there so far. I think that it's very well done from a dramatic perspective, and from like a setting each episode up and like crafting it well perspective. I feel like, when in the mood, I might delve back into it, but...
Not your binge show. All right.
I mean, I have a lot of difficulty with TV shows in general, I will tell you right now. I cannot, usually stick to a TV show. That is probably also biasing my rating, but that is what I have to say about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jahnavi. Pat, how about you? How do you feel about it in terms of 1 to 5 ice?
So, if I were just going to rate the first 4 episodes, I would probably give it 4 pieces of ice, but as a whole, since I've seen the first season and I kind of have a better idea, it did get off to a really slow start, but by the end of the season, I would definitely give it a 5 ice pieces out of 5.
Oh man.
He is Patty Ice, after all.
I am Patty
Ice.
Damn. But it's just, I'm really excited to see where the rest of the series is going, so...
Heck yes. All right.
Heck yeah.
Because I didn't bring this topic and it was a listener topic, I'm actually going to just throw on in my 2 cents on The Expanse. And I'm going to hit it right down the middle. So I'm going to give it 4 pieces of ice.
That's not the middle.
Wait, did we get 3 and 5? Yeah, the middle of your guys, not the middle of the middle.
I was going to say the middle of the middle.
I am very excited to keep watching it, and I think that if I get to the end of season 1, I might also want to give it 5 pieces of ice. But I actually thought it was really interesting because it makes unexpected moves, I think. And Jahnavi's right that it does kind of veer towards the dramatic when it does that, but I found that very compelling. So I'm excited to keep on. I think it's a show that's going to keep me on my toes. And so I'm excited to keep watching.
You're going to be on point.
Ew. I'm going to be on those ballerina points.
Yes, you are.
When I was 5. Awesome. All right. So now I have the unenviable job of having to select a gold star student out of the 2 of you. And I have to choose the person who I believe best represented themselves and their topics in this episode. I've been trying to do the thing where I take notes on how people are doing, because I find at the end of the episode I just go on a gut feeling and then feel bad if I've missed something that they said that was really great. So briefly, Jahnavi, I think that you had really great points about the literary references, and I think that your interpretation of the people, power of the people, was really interesting because it was more about kind of the people in your stories, and so you brought something that was definitely different in a realistic life, based on a real story. And your point about the wronged party and the presentation of drama was really interesting, and I think that was great, so thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Pat, you brought a really great knowledge of the episodes of The Expanse, and your enjoyment of Firefly definitely came through. And I think that those two pieces of media are they're not very similar, but I think that you were able to draw the similarities, which is great.
Yeah, I think they're pretty analogous.
And your idea of the perspective of the shows based on when they were written, so Star Trek being a lot more optimistic and Firefly and Expanse being more pessimistic just because of when they were written, was really interesting. So it is a very tight race, but I think this episode has to go to Jahnavi. I just had like an extra 1 point on Pat there. So thank you so much for bringing all of those different perspectives with you for this episode.
And my lead is dwindling.
Oh, I didn't know that, but that makes me feel great because I'll make sure that it's achievable too. Just kidding. So you're going to actually win the Golden Canterbury.
Ooh. I'm delighted.
Good luck. It's going to blow up.
Yeah.
Then I'll have a bunch of golden confetti, Pat. It'll be great.
Oh, damn. That's some positive perspective. Love that. No, but you guys both did really great. So thank you so much for participating in this episode.
Thanks for talking to me and forcing me to communicate with the outside world on a Sunday.
Yeah. I got my groceries delivered to me today. Also, Charles and I went to Madison Food Fest today, or Food Truck Fest, which was really fun. So it's at a local community pool that had like a dozen food trucks just like out. So that's what we did. It was great.
Not bad.
Anyway, that's not related. So that wraps up this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Common Geeking Program. I am your host, Laura Kramer, and you can find me at the Common Geeking Program Facebook page. Again, I've been hosted by LOL. I've been joined by Jahnavi Iyer. Would you like to rep yourself?
Hello. I am in fact Jahnavi Iyer. My Twitter is at JKIyer1. I don't tweet a lot, but I do sometimes, so if you want to hear those, you can find me over there. Thank you for listening to me talk a lot today.
And I'm Pat. You can find me on Instagram at PattySOfficial, and my Twitter is Pure Riffery. Don't make Twitter handles when you're 16, kids.
True though. Great. So next week, our episode is going to be hosted by Pat. Pat, what you talking about?
I am talking about this documentary called Exit Through the Gift Shop, which I thought was going to be like a biopic about, or biopic, I don't know how the fuck you say that word, but I thought it was going to be kind of like a biography of Banksy, and then it ended up kind of taking an interesting twist, and it kind of made Banksy question what the fuck art even is, and if his career is a giant joke. So yeah, it was pretty cool. So we're going to be talking about that.
Hell yeah.
I can't remember when that one airs.
That's going to air on November 23rd.
Oh, shit.
Thanksgiving episode.
Which, is that Black Friday? Oh, man.
So while you're waiting in line to buy your TV,
listen
to our podcast.
It's going to be great. I'll be at work, almost certainly.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
They will be exiting through the gift shop.
Oh, man. Well, that sounds really interesting. So, watch up on that. It is that again. There's so many things on my list, but I have not watched Exit Through the Gift Shop yet, and I've heard it's really good. So
it's pretty sick.
Good to know.
There's the one dude in it who isn't Banksy, who's like a main character. It just makes me want to punch him in the face a lot. But
that's always fun.
Don't you love a punchable character?
Well, he's not
so
a character
much.
Though. He's a real fucking person.
That makes it better. I'm not advocating for violence, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just
you just started kickboxing recently and talking about punching people in the face. You're good.
It's not even combat kickboxing. It's literally just like a punching bag.
Cardio.
But you know, that's okay.
Well, don't mess with Jahnavi. She'll mess you up. All right.
Yeah.
Be sure to tune in next Friday on November 23rd and follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Geeking Program. Man, I really want to say at Common Geeking Program when I say that. It's not. It's at Geeking Program. Any engagement, such as sharing a post, tagging us, or tweeting #CGP, will enter you into a raffle where you get to pick the topic for a future episode, just like Rich Baldos was able to do for us today. None of us had seen The Expanse, really. I mean, I had watched like the first episode. And Rich Baldos gave us this beautiful treasure of a gift, which was watching a new show. So if you have something you love and you want us to talk about it, go ahead and engage with us on social media, and you could potentially pick something for us to talk about. Reviewing us on Apple Podcasts is super critical to help grow our show. The only way people get to listen to it is if it shows up with a lot of reviews, and the more reviews and ratings we get, the higher up we'll show up on the charts. And right now we're sitting at a solid 5 stars, no new comments. But if you go ahead and give us a rating, that would really, really help. And we'll read new reviews on air, which we did not get. I did check. Anyway, damn. I know. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, sharing, and everything you do. We will talk to you next week.
Bye.
That was cute.
This episode of the Common Geeking program is hosted by Laura Kramer. She is joined by Patrick Brem and Jahnavi Iyer. This episode is sponsored by Computer Malfunctions, meaning I've only heard half of the episode as of recording this segment. The podcast is created and produced by Colin, Ketchen, and Jeff Leavitt, with this episode edited by me, Colin Ketchen, as well as Matt Canavan, thank you Matt, and featuring original music also by me. Next week, CGP will be talking about Exit Through the Gift Shop, and in the not-too-distant future, we have some surprises we are excited to share with you, but until then, thank you for listening to this.
I think my groceries are here. One moment, please.
Okay.
I agree.
Oh my god.
Have you had a day, my friend?
It's just mostly the issue with my car registration that's pissing me off right now, but
I mean, that's understandable.
right now I'm slated to win my fantasy matchup, so that's always good.
Cool. Nice. Very good. My coworkers keep trying to, I don't know, like what particular fantasy matchup are you talking about?
I play football and basketball and hockey fantasy.
So which one?
Right now it's football.
Football. Okay.
Yeah.
Because my coworkers, like my older male coworkers, keep telling me that I need to like get into football and like pick a team and stuff, and I'm like, that just sounds like a lot of work for someone who doesn't have cable and doesn't already care about football. So
yeah, I go out with my friends every Sunday and we watch at a bar. But
yeah, that sounds chill. Like if I was in that habit, that sounds easy. I would totally do that.
Like if I didn't have these friends who care about football, I would not care about football either. It's hard to just like care about it on your own.
Right. It's not like,
especially if you don't have a certain tie to a team, and like the DMV area doesn't really have any good teams right now.
I mean, I see a lot of Redskins stickers.
Yeah, Redskins are garbage.
But it's also very uncomfortable for me personally.
My main issue with them is the fact that, I mean, besides the name, my main issue with the Redskins is they don't play in Washington. They should not be the Washington team. Like, they should be the Maryland Redskins, if anything.
I suppose so, but I mean, the district isn't very big. I don't know where they'd squeeze in a football field.
All the other ones, they had one at RFK. That's where they used to play, and all the other DC sports are in DC.
You know, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a decent point.
That's my main issue with the New York teams, too, is the Giants and the Jets play in New Jersey.
The Jersey Jets?
Yeah.
Yeah. Welp. I don't know.
What you gonna do?
I can't say why they made those decisions, but
yeah, hockey's the best sport of all, and that's the only one that matters. So
I like rugby, but that's because I played it, so I probably care more because of that.
Rugby's cool because it doesn't have all these bullshit rules. Like, the reason why football sucks now is that every time somebody tries to tackle a quarterback, it's like, oh, you roughed the passer. I'm a football player that can't get tackled.
There's also no continuous play. Like, it just stops too much.
That's why I like hockey. Like, hockey's just continuous until there's a foul or something,
right?
And then it stops.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with rugby. It is, for the most part, continuous play.
Yeah.
And like, hey, you want fast running? There's fast running it. Do you want people pushing each other? There's that in it too. Like, it's a smorgasbord of athletic activity that is engaging.
Like, basketball is constant movement, but you can't touch each other. Like,
right.
You just flop, and it's fucking annoying. But like,
yeah,
that's my main issue with that whole situation too.
Sports.
But hockey is the greatest sport in the world. So physical, so fast, so athletic.
I've yet to witness a hockey game, but one day it'll happen.
You got a good team down there if you ever make it actually like in downtown DC.
Laura is back.
I guess they're more like Chinatown though.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry about that. My groceries arrived safe and sound. All of the colds are in the fridge and the freezer.
Glad to hear it. Good job.
We're good.
Feeding yourself.
Doodly doo.
Dude, my fingers go wide for that.
Sorry about that. That was terrible timing because I was literally mid-thought, and that is 100% gone, so.
That's what she said.
Yeah. We're going to have to just skip right over what I was thinking at that time. But,
I'm trying to remember what you were thinking. I can't remember.
we were talking a little bit about...
We were talking about Firefly and Power of the People and the Alliance.
Yeah. The Robin Hood situation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.